March 2003. The skies over Iraq are lit with fire as British and American forces launch their invasion. Missiles rain down on Baghdad, tanks advance through the desert, and Saddam Hussein's regime begins to collapse. The mission was supposed to be clear: remove Saddam Hussein and eliminate his weapons of mass destruction. But there was one major problem: no such weapons were ever found. So how did the United States and the United Kingdom end up fighting one of the most controversial wars of the 21st century? To answer that, we need to go back to September 11, 2001. On that day, Al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked passenger planes and attacked New York and Washington, D.C., killing nearly 3,000 people. America was shaken to its core, and President George W. Bush declared a global war on terror. Afghanistan was the first target because it harbored Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. The invasion there was swift, and the Taliban were pushed from power. But soon, attention turned to Iraq. Even though Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11s, Washington began to focus on him. The fear was not about what Saddam had done, but what he might do in the future. If terrorists carried out another attack, what if they had chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons? Saddam Hussein was no stranger to brutality. He had ruled Iraq since 1979 through fear and violence. In the 1980s, he used chemical weapons against Iran during the long and bloody Iran-Iraq War. In 1988, he launched a chemical attack against his own Kurdish population, killing tens of thousands. For Western leaders, this history was proof that Saddam could not be trusted. The shadow of the First Gulf War also loomed large. In 1990, Saddam invaded Kuwait, prompting an international coalition led by the United States to intervene. The war ended quickly, with Iraqi forces expelled from Kuwait. Afterward, Iraq was hit with sanctions, and UN weapons inspectors entered the country to dismantle Saddam's weapons programs. By the late 1990s, most of Iraq's stockpiles had been destroyed. But Saddam wanted the world and his enemies at home to believe that he still had weapons of mass destruction. That illusion kept his enemies in check, but after 9/11s, the same illusion convinced Washington and London that Saddam posed a new and dangerous threat. President George W. Bush warned of an axis of evil nations like Iran, North Korea, and Iraq that were allegedly pursuing deadly weapons. In his eyes, Saddam was at the center of this danger. But America didn't want to act alone. Across the Atlantic, British Prime Minister Tony Blair became Bush's closest ally. The two leaders built a strong partnership, with Blair promising in 2002, "I will be with you, whatever." Still, there was a legal problem. Removing Saddam just for regime change wasn't allowed under international law.
In late 2002, the United Nations passed Resolution 1441, giving Saddam one final chance to prove he had disarmed. Inspectors returned to Iraq but found little evidence of active weapons programs. France, Germany, and Russia saw this as proof that war was unnecessary. Bush and Blair saw it as proof that Saddam was hiding something. By early 2003, diplomacy was failing. The UN Security Council was split, but the United States and the United Kingdom were running out of patience. Timing also played a role. Iraq's scorching summer heat made large-scale military operations nearly impossible. If war was going to happen, it had to happen soon. On March 17, 2003, President Bush gave Saddam Hussein and his sons an ultimatum: leave Iraq within 48 hours or face military action. Saddam refused. 3 days later, the invasion began. British Royal Marines secured the Alfa Peninsula, while American forces stormed across the desert. Basra fell quickly, and within weeks, Baghdad was captured. Saddam's regime collapsed in record time. On May 1st, President Bush declared victory aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, standing beneath a banner that read "Mission Accomplished." But the mission was far from over. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found in Iraq. The central justification for war simply didn't exist. What followed instead was years of violence and chaos. An insurgency erupted across the country. Sectarian conflict between Sunni and Shia groups ripped Iraq apart. Terrorist organizations, including a new group called ISIS, would eventually rise from the instability. The human cost was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis were killed. Thousands of coalition soldiers lost their lives. Trillions of dollars were spent. and the credibility of Western governments suffered deeply when the intelligence used to justify the war was revealed to be flawed or deliberately exaggerated. The Iraq War left behind a legacy that still shapes global politics today. Supporters argue that removing Saddam Hussein ended the rule of a brutal dictator. Critics say the war was based on lies, left Iraq in ruins, and destabilized the Middle East for decades to come. The conflict changed how the world views military intervention. Every debate about foreign wars that followed, whether in Syria, Libya, or beyond, has been overshadowed by the question, what about Iraq? The war began with a promise to protect the world from weapons of mass destruction. It ended with no such weapons found in a region plunged into turmoil. The question remains, was the Iraq War a tragic miscalculation or a war that was never really about weapons at all?